John Coltrane's positively one of my major influences. It's him meeting with Duke Ellington, and half the record is Jimmy Garrison and Elvin Jones, and half of the record is Sam Woodyard and Aaron Bell. And so it's Duke's rhythm section, Duke's bass and drums, and Coltrane's bass and drums, but always Ellington on piano and Coltrane on saxophone. So for me, this is just like particularly elegant music, and it's Duke at his best, which is this, this approach that fits in any style, that never sounds dated and yet is unmistakably Duke Ellington, and it's the pure music part of Duke Ellington with the same from Coltrane. This is there's like stuff that typifies his 60s approach with his band, like Take the Coltrane, where he's playing the way he did in the early 60s, and redefine saxophone playing. I love these old impulses as well. I have most of the Coltrane ones, and there's a certain sound to them you can hear the sound of Van Gelder Studios. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating to me about Van Gelder how you can listen to this and you can listen to a Blue Note record that were recorded in the same studio like a week apart, and they sound completely different. There's a house sound to Impulse, there's a house sound to Blue Note.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They both sound like Van Gelder Studios. They both sound amazing in completely different ways.
Do you think that's because they had different producers?
I do think that it's an intentional, this label wants it to sound like this and this label wants it to sound like that. Most of mine are stereo. This is a mono copy, and in mono it's really great. I mean, the stereos are a little bit funny because in that period, with these stereos anyway, to accentuate the new stereo thing, they put the drums in one channel and the piano in the other channel with nothing, saxophone in the middle, but like zero drums at all in the other speaker and zero piano at all. You can literally like take them out of
it's like Day Tripper,
the recording with the balance control, but that's still there's something that sounds great about that, even though the presentation is very unrealistic in a way.
Right.
But I do enjoy. I love the sound of those stereos, just not for that reason. For other reasons. But in mono, it's also great as well. Like where then with this I can really hear the band together as a unit more. Which I really like. This is another, I would say, like feel-good record where, just this whole record sounds great. It's amazing music. It's amazing playing. It feels like joy. This was only very recently released on vinyl, I think maybe 2 years ago. And I listened to it primarily on CD when it first came out in the mid-90s. This was recorded live at the Vanguard, and it's this particular one that had a really large impact on me, primarily because of Tom Harrell playing on it. And this is, for me, a really incredible representation of Tom Harrell's playing. I mean, all Tom Harrell records are great, but this one stands out to me. This is a cordless quartet with Joe Lovano and Anthony Cox and Billy Hart. And one of the things I really like about this record is the sound quality, actually. It was recorded by the great engineer David Baker, and it captures the sound of the Vanguard, which I really appreciated. It really makes you feel like you're there. So I like the way it was recorded. But this is, Tom Harrell for me is another one of these players that I would say really impacted me, and I feel helped me go in a certain direction and find what I feel is my voice. And he, his language is coming out of bebop, but then there's all this chromatic and intervallic kind of stuff as well. It's, to me, it's really one of the defining voices of modern jazz trumpet playing, and in this case he plays a lot of flugelhorn. And so for me this had a great impact because his playing is really line based, and I mentioned when we were talking about Clifford Brown how he was my first really big influence, and a big part of that was the way that he strings notes together to create lines, and that's always been something that appealed to me and that I've always used in my playing. And so hearing Tom Harrell's way of constructing lines and including these references to standard harmony, but then also extending that and doing other sort of more modern, interesting stuff. This is Bartok Concerto for Orchestra. It's designed to be an orchestra piece that features the whole orchestra at different points. But this is mid 50s Chicago Symphony Orchestra under Fritz Reiner, and this was the definitive brass section of symphonic music. Herseth, who was the principal in Chicago for 55 years, and changed the entirety of symphonic trumpet playing. And this was the brass section. I mean, there was the peak probably lasted a number of years, but this is definitely in the peak. And for me, this is some of the most incredible example of trumpet sound on record, and it's amazingly recorded. This is a spectacular sounding record. I mean, this is like, for a great recording of orchestra, this is a phenomenal recording. And so particularly, and the music is great. It's got all these harmonic aspects that relate to jazz. There's sort of the augmented axis that John Coltrane used on Giant Steps and things like that. Bartok is using that in the first movement in this, and there's all these things that relate, for me to my world of jazz. But this is just like really special brass sound, and particularly Adolf Herseth. And as a funny side note for the nerds, my my trumpet is 4 serial numbers from Adolf Hirseth's trumpet, and the whole section, they had consecutive serial numbers. This brass section changed orchestral brass playing. I mean, he had a car accident and damaged his lips, and he changed to a larger mouthpiece because he had a scar where the old mouthpiece was, and that company Bach provided this the section with a set of C trumpets, and within a matter of years, like a few years, large mouthpiece and Bach C trumpet became the standard of orchestras around the world, and this section kind of defined brass playing for. There were many other great orchestras and great brass sections, but this one was really definitive, and Adolf Hirseth, I think a lot of trumpet players would agree, was like the greatest orchestral trumpet player.